YouTube. I am Synathidy, and I'm making this video to review the PS2 game, Growlanser Generations. And this is actually two games in one. This includes Growlanser 2, The Sense of Justice, and Growlanser 3, The Dual Darkness. So, yeah, it's like two games in the series packaged together. And, this is a Working Designs game. You can see the Working Designs logo right down here. And Working Designs, they've made a lot of games I like well, a few anyway, for PS1, Alundra, plus the Lunar games, and both of those are big favorites for me. So, but this was the first Working Designs game I got, and I got it back in 2010 because I was kind of at the start of a big anime craze. I was like 20 years old, and I wanted a game with a lot of anime visuals and style. So I got this game, and it gave me anime, and it also gave me pretty good games. And so yeah, I'll get into my review without further ado. First, to talk about the plot and story of these games. I guess the biggest thing I'll say is, as far as JRPGs go, these have some realism to them. It is your typical save the world type of story, you know. You got your villains who are doing the stereotypical villain stuff, but you've got a lot of real themes that are believable, sort of like war, famine, political intrigue, assassination, that type of thing. And it's pretty cool to play a JRPG that is kind of rooted in those more realistic themes. And both of these games, both Growlanser 2 and 3 in this pack, they both have that in common. And it just gives everything a bit more gravity and a sense of belief to me that's a bit refreshing in the fantastical world of JRPGs. And I'm not going to go into huge depth, but yeah, it felt fairly refreshing. And Growlanser 3 is one that I played most recently. I was playing that just and beat that within the last couple weeks, going back to it. And it does have a little amnesia going on with the main character. I know that's a very, very cliched trope, but it's nothing that detracts too much from the game, because there's enough other interesting things going on in the plot, and the amnesia isn't focused on a ton. So yeah, it's a good plot. It's nothing mind-blowing, but it's good. It keeps your attention, and it gets a bit more interesting as the games go on. Next, I'll talk about characters. These games have a pretty good variety of characters. Both of them have a pretty good number of characters that are in your party. Like, there's at least 5 or 6 in both of them. And none of them, I would say, annoy me too much. They're pretty good and varied personalities. Yeah, there's characters of a pretty good range of ages, and they each have pretty good backstories. There's not a ton of character development, but yeah, I don't think I have any complaints about the characters, really. They're just solid, and they're definitely entertaining and amusing pretty much throughout the games. I probably prefer the characters in Growlanser 3 a little more than 2, but that's just my preference. Gameplay. So I'll talk a bit about what gameplay involves in these. You've got a world map that you can freely traverse, so that's a good thing in my book. You go town to town, dungeon to dungeon, and random encounters with like monsters and whatnot, that can happen on the world map, but it cannot happen in dungeons, interestingly. Yeah, what happens in dungeons is you can like see the enemies sort of prowling around each room, and you can actually avoid them if you are careful, and also if you're a little lucky. So that was kind of cool. I kind of enjoyed that. Dungeon design, though. This is one thing that I have a little bit of a critique with. The dungeons in this game, they're kind of repetitive. Like, they actually literally have the same room design and background just repeated throughout the dungeon, so that you're like, every room you go to is exactly the same. Like, it literally looks exactly the same, and it has, you know, an entrance north, south, east, and west, and you go to the next room, it's exactly the same. So that's a little lazy, a little lame, but it didn't detract too much. I mean, it would have been better if it was more unique, but hey, what are you gonna do? The other thing I'll mention is missions. What happens in these games is you have missions that start at discrete moments and end at discrete moments, and when these things pop up, you'll get an objective, like a clear objective, like defeat all enemies or make sure some person or group of people escape alive. There's a few other interesting objectives, and these missions are pretty cool. Like, I don't think there was a single mission that I felt like really irritated with or anything. Like, they felt all pretty refreshing and had a unique twist that was brought into the mix to make them fun. I'll also mention character relationships in this game. There's quite a bit of ability to develop character relationships with like the members of your party, and the thing I like is that you can often pick and choose your dialogue options, like how your protagonist responds to your party members, and it's pretty amusing because you can pick some crazy, funny responses depending on what kind of character you want to play, and you can actually choose from the start of these games like what kind of protagonist you are, and the way they do that is by blood type and also star sign, which is that's kind of a unique little thing. And what that'll do is it'll actually gray out some of the dialogue options so that you can't pick certain things to say that are not in your character. But I'll just read briefly like what a type A blood does here. So under type A in the manual, I'm reading the manual here, right there, it says positives: law-abiding, honest, neat, diligent, orderly, methodical, fashionable, steady, loyal. And then negative, it says selfish, secretive, picky, soft-spoken, pessimistic, inflexible, gossip, boorish, drunk. So yeah, there's 4 different blood types, and each one of them has like a positive and con list like that, and it's pretty interesting. And you can say some pretty amusing things. At one point in Growlanser 3, when I was playing through recently, one of the female characters was acting kind of snotty to me, and I had the option to respond with, like, something ridiculous. It was like, fine, I'll get out of here, biatch, or something like that, and it just made me crack up that I was able to say that. There's many more amusing options. You just have to take my word for it, but I don't want to spoil too many of them. Also, one other funny thing is there's a lot of funny things that your enemies, like enemy soldiers, say when they're dying. And there was this one reference to the Happy Gilmore Adam Sandler comedy. In that movie, there's this one scene, where Bob Barker says, "The price is wrong, bitch." And there was this one enemy one time who died and said, "The price is wrong, ellipsis, bit." And then the character just disappeared, died, and I cracked up at that moment. I really did, because I like that comedy. And, okay, at this point, I'll talk about the battle system a little bit in this game. It's got a pretty deep battle system. The way battles work are pretty great in this game, I think. It's strategy RPG gameplay, so it's your top-down thing with your characters that move around this battlefield, but it's unique in that this is not a grid-based system. This is a free movement SRPG, so your characters can basically move in any direction. They can go anywhere freely without being linked to a grid, and you can set the path they move on your turn. And you can set like 4-point paths that are pretty long and like go all over the field, so that's pretty neat. And there's like magic skills and techniques. Magic is something that uses like magic points, typical in RPGs, and for those you have to like cast a spell, and then there'll be a wait time for your character to actually cast it. And skills are like just special abilities that are always active. Like there might be one that makes your character get critical hits more often, and you unlock these things, both skills and magic, by leveling up. You get some points that you can sort of spend on unlocking these different attributes. And techniques are these abilities that can be used sometimes both inside and outside of battle. And they have a lot of interesting effects. Like there's a dash technique that makes your character run through battle real fast. And some techniques can be used outside of battle for like either making your character avoid enemies easier in dungeons. Like there's something called silent steps, which allows you to get closer to enemies when you run past them without them detecting you in a battle starting. So that's pretty cool. One thing I'll say about the weapons in this game is it's a little bit like Final Fantasy VII, which is a good thing in my book, in that you have what's called these ring weapons. And it's this thing in the Growlancer world where every character can get this kind of ring. There's a lot of different rings, and it takes the shape of a weapon, and it takes the shape of a different weapon for each character. And yeah, that's all I need to say about the weapons themselves. But then you can insert up to 3 gems in these ring weapons, and the gems have a ton of different effects, tons of different gem combinations you can put in these things. And what reminds me of Final Fantasy VII is that it's a little like putting materia into a weapon with the materia slots and whatnot. Very similar, and offers a lot of customization, and it's good. It's good stuff. The visuals are something I want to talk about next. There's nothing overly fancy in this game, either game. There's good sprites, good detailed sprites. You can see maybe on the back here. I don't know, maybe not. You can't really see it that well. Anyway, there's good detailed sprites that you can see on the overworld and in battle. And there are also like dialogue sprites, like dialogue pictures of each character that pop up in a lot of the dialogue scenes. This is very dialogue heavy as a JRPG, you know, nothing surprising. And those dialogue pictures are like real high quality anime pictures. Like, they're definitely super good. There's not really any animation to the characters in those dialogue sprites, but, you know, other than like eyes blinking, but I have no complaints with it. I think it was good. Also, the backgrounds. The backgrounds in this game are pretty good. They're pretty good. The overall art style is, you know, it looks kind of like watercolor, sort of painted stuff, but it's not very bright or bubbly. It's like kind of drab often, and a little gritty. It's kind of dark, you know, the art style of these backgrounds in this game, the environments. It's nothing too happy or anything, which is appropriate because these games are about war and famine. That's kind of like the setting of these games. So, yeah, good visuals. Audio is an area these games shine in, I thought, in spades. There is a ton of voice acting in these games, and this was one of the things that actually drew me to them so much, since I wanted to get like an anime-like game back in the day. And it says on the back here like that there was 10 hours, yeah, like 10 solid hours of voice work done for these games, and I believe it. There's definitely a lot of voice acting. Like, pretty much every major scene with the characters, every major dialogue cutscene is voiced, and the voice acting is terrific. It really is. All the characters have terrifically done voices. They're all appropriate for the characters. None of them are really too annoying to me. And I will say one thing about one character's voice. This guy, Victor. Victor is a like older scientist type character in Growlanser 3, and he's got like he's kind of got this like German sort of accent, and he's just a hilarious character to listen to, and one of my favorites actually. And yeah, that German accent he has is thick and just nailed. It's just really nailed by his voice actor in this game. And but yeah, there are tons of great voice actors contributing to characters in this game, and they were all great, all amusing. Can't speak highly enough about the voice acting. The music isn't anything too great, but it felt always really appropriate for the setting, like the music in towns or dungeons. It set the mood just right, I thought. And yeah, it was always pleasant to listen to. It was nothing ever too annoying. And I never got tired of any tracks, you know, whether they're battle themes or dungeon themes or town themes. They were all really good, I thought. Yeah, sound quality, instrumentation, all that. Pretty much just it's pretty much just your typical orchestral type of medieval fantasy soundtrack, but some of the tracks are memorable, and it's a good soundtrack. The intro song in both games is really terrific to me. In Growlanser 2, it's like this electric guitar driven rock sort of thing, just instrumental. It's pretty cool, I like it. And then in 3, the intro song, which also plays in a fuller version at the end, is this kind of more ballad-like song sung by this female singer. And, it's good. It's good stuff. I recommend it. I looked up a few of the tracks and got them on my MP3 player phone. Length of these games, they're like, these games aren't overly long. Like, both 2 and 3 took me like 30 to 40 hours to complete, and that was pretty consistent. And my most recent playthrough a couple weeks ago of Growlanser 3 was like 30 to 40 hours, so not too long, but also not too short. It can be a little longer if you go after a lot of side quests. That's one thing I didn't mention. There's a lot of side quests in these games. A lot of optional little kind of plot gems and plot arcs to discover for yourself. And depending on how crazy you go trying to go after those, it might make your experience a little longer. Some of them are kind of hard to find out about, though. Like, it's not always easy to know at what point you're supposed to go after these things and where you're supposed to go and who you're supposed to talk to and, you know, what key item you're supposed to show who. But there's some good depth there to go after if you're so inclined and if you're clever enough to figure out what to do. So I guess I'll just kind of wrap up my review at this point. For cons of these games, you know, there's some dungeon monotony, not a ton of environmental variety. You know, the world itself you explore is not that big. There's like 10 major cities, towns that you can visit in each game, 10 or so, and you know, you can traverse the world map on foot and eventually explore the whole thing, but it doesn't feel like too massive of a game. Like, it's smaller than something like Final Fantasy VII for sure. But still, you know, there's still a decent number of places you can explore. There's also not a ton of character development, as I mentioned earlier, but it's kind of made up for by how amusing the characters are, I thought. Pros, I have to say, depth of customization in battle and how you interact with other characters is really well done. And there's also a lot of just depth in how you choose to play and interact with other characters. So that's always a fun thing to be able to do. And yeah, I don't think I have too much else to say about this game, but definitely highly recommend Growlanser Generations if you can track it down. I definitely enjoyed my playthroughs of this game, and yeah, I think it's a really good one. Kind of a more obscure JRPG, but I would recommend it. Alright, peace out, YouTube.
measure.